folder has the new, has the attendance sheets to make sure everyone shows up. Ooh, it is pretty updated. And then just goes to, usually Melanie takes care of that if she's here.
Okay, this is the Development Review Board for Burlington for September 17th. We take up items in the order that they're on the agenda, and we ask people who are participating or want to be notified to sign the clipboard up there. And when we call the project, we ask the applicant to come up, and you please use the microphones when anybody's speaking up there. We have some communications on 83 North Willard Street that came today or yesterday?
The past couple of days, yep.
Couple of days, okay. And we'll look at those. One thing on the agenda, that 2026 Church Street is being withdrawn.
That's correct.
The application is
Withdrawn, yes.
Is anybody here for 20 to 26 Church Street? Okay. Minutes, we do have some minutes that were in our packet from September 3rd. A nice new envelope there, Lane. Okay. I think it looked like, was Village Green recommended for consent and it just came on too late?
Correct. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Well, officially, we don't have anything on the consent agenda. So the first item on the public hearing is 83 North Willard Street. Is the applicant here? Do you want to come up? And I'll ask the applicant and anybody else who's going to speak on 83 North Willard to raise your right hand so I can swear you in. And do you swear to tell the truth and whole truth under pain and penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So this is a request to allow occupancy by 5 unrelated adults at 83 North Willard. Do you want to introduce yourself and?
State my case?
Yes.
Okay.
And please keep the microphone closer to you.
Is this good?
Even closer. Good.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Diane Frankenfield, and with my husband, Andy Frankenfield, we own 83 North Willard Street.
A little closer.
Better?
There you go.
You really need to keep it closer. It doesn't.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My name's Diane Frankenfield, and with my husband, Andy, we own 83 North Willard Street. And we approach you today with a request for a parking waiver for 83 North Willard Street. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to come before you and really explain why we think this is necessary and address any concerns you might have related to it. In the review by the staff of the zoning board that informs this meeting, the following points and requests of us were made. Number one, that we get a wastewater permit. So we've reached out to Renata Marshall of the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and we're in the process of getting that very permit. The request that we have a property manager, that we have a live-in property manager be required, as such was required at 26 Summit Street. We do have a property manager who lives here in Burlington. Her name is Emily LaFleur, and she is listed on all the documents for the property and readily available when there's an issue that arises. 26 Summit Street, to the extent that I understand it, is a 4-family dwelling. So I wondered why it was necessary that we get an in-house property manager, but we would agree to do so if that is the ruling of this board. The third point that was raised was residential density. So in the document prepared by the zoning division, it states that conditional use approval by the DRB in the RM district, as I understand it, must have 2,700 square feet of space to allow us to have a 5th tenant there. We reached out to the assessors, the tax assessor in Burlington, who lists our property. Kenneth at the assessor office confirmed that our $11,500 tax bill for 83 North Willard is based on 2,917 square feet of living space.
That's on 3 levels, isn't it?
That's on 3 levels.
And
we have a first level that's 1,062. We have a second level that's 1,060. And we have what is referred to in the tax assessor's documents as a half-story finished space. So up there are 4 full-size rooms that all meet the requirements of a bedroom. There's a full bath. There's 8.5-foot ceilings, of full height staircase and fire escapes. So together, that's 2917 square feet, far in excess of the 2,700 that's required in the ordinance. This is the area that we pay taxes on, and we pay money to heat. And to have it not occupied, at least to a slightly greater degree, makes the house extremely expensive to run and honestly isn't particularly environmentally sound. And the additional parking space was really, so based on all this, the additional parking space was the sole requirement for which we were requesting a waiver. The comments of the zoning board speak to the tendency of more people to have more cars, and we certainly appreciate that. And we are more than willing to put any restrictions in the lease or provide deeded parking as an amendment to the lease anytime a fifth tenant is included. We discussed the efforts in Burlington to make the town very bicycle friendly. In fact, there is no residential parking on Willard Street, I imagine largely because there's a huge bike lane there now. The public transportation facilities within Burlington are exceptional. We have contacted the car share service to provide that as complimentary in our lease as well. We did actually talk to a variety of people at the zoning office about adding a parking space. We feel that that would really undermine both the attractiveness of the house and its historic, really, look and feel. To put another parking space in front of the porch would really be an eyesore, and we'd much rather limit the cars there entirely rather than do that. So that's why we came to ask for the parking waiver. The surrounding streets have residential parking restrictions, and Willard Street does not. So anything that we can do to ease the number of cars, we are more than happy to do. What else? Basically, in closing, I wanted to say that my husband and I love Burlington. In the last 4 years, we've purchased 3 homes and put a tremendous amount of money into each one of them. They're all on Willard Street. And honestly, with the exception of 83, when we bought it, the 2 were absolutely horrible, abominable eyesores, full of raucous students, uncared lawns, peeling paint, tons and tons of zoning I don't know what the correct word is, but zoning violations. So, for example, when we bought 121 North Willard Street, the entire back double-deck porch was completely falling and horribly dangerous. We replaced it, we painted it, we gutted the house. Well, we didn't gut it, but we actually drilled in and put in all new insulation. We emptied out the attic. We've done everything we can to upgrade it. And in doing so, we feel we've really improved its curb appeal, and we've really made it something that was no longer an embarrassment to the community. We've done the same at 104 North Willard, removing asbestos, painting, all new windows. And right now, at 83, in the first 2 months we owned it, we had the entire place painted inside and out, consistent with the historic nature of the house, respecting the colors that were there before. And we're in the process of restoring the windows with one-maker renovations, also at great expense. All the money we make on this property, which isn't much, goes right back into enhancing its value for Burlington. We asked that we be allowed a fifth tenant in a massively large house, subject to any of your restrictions on parking, and making accommodations for that so that we can continue to invest in the community. We know that Burlington has a huge problem with affordable housing, and we respect the concerns of the community. We aspire to be part of the solution. Thank you.
Okay, and one just question is the current status of the house, it's rented out now?
It's rented out now. We have a lease with 4 young women. One thing I'd like to say is in the entire time we've owned these properties, we have never once been contacted by the police or neighbors about any concerns. We had one incident when someone blocked the sidewalk with a car sticking out. That car was immediately ticketed, and that ticket immediately paid. I mean, kids make mistakes, adults make mistakes. But that is the only issue that I have been aware of. A couple, right around move-in day, our old property manager, got a call about a mattress that had been left on our property. And we immediately made 3 calls, 1 a day, to the city, asking for guidance or a pickup. And when they failed to respond to that request, we got rid of it at our own expense.
The house does look very nice. It's nicely
Thank you.
painted and everything else. I don't know if there's any questions that the...
Jeff has.
Yeah,
I have
can
a
you
couple
tell
questions.
me a little bit about the third floor? Is there an attic space above the third floor?
There isn't. It's fully built out, so when you walk up the full set of staircases, I think it's, at one point, I mean, it's a historic home. I believe it was probably a servant's quarters, but there's a full set of double stairwells that go up to it, go up to the second floor, and then one goes up to the third, where my husband's 6'3", where he can stand, doesn't have to stoop at all, and go up. You go up, and there's actually 4 full-size rooms up there, a full bath, and then there's closet space built into the eaves, where there's not bedrooms. And the ceiling's really quite high, at least 8.5 feet.
Was that finished after the house was, do you know when it was finished?
I honestly don't. It was that way when we bought it.
Okay. And when you bought it, was it advertised as a space that could be rented to more than 4 adults?
It wasn't advertised at all. I believe it was owned by a single family.
Okay.
I think a long time ago, when I read in the history of the property, I think it's had a bit of a spotty past. I think once it was a boarding house at one point, or part of a University of Vermont, even before that.
Okay.
But others in the neighborhood might know more than I do.
Based on your history owning property in the area, when you purchased the property, did you understand that the zoning regulations generally prohibit more than 4 unrelated adults from living in a house?
To be completely honest, I didn't. It was a surprise to me. Not a good surprise, frankly, because when we were doing the math, I mean, the way this works for us, 121 is 4 people, and 104 is a duplex with 2 up and 2 down. And I had no idea this restriction existed. We weren't informed of it by our realtor or anybody else. So I was stunned to find that a house this large had that kind of limitation. And I honestly, I have to tell you, I don't know that I would have bought it if I knew.
Okay. And have you looked to see if you could put the additional parking space, physically
Did.
put it
Yeah.
on?
So,
and have you talked with Scott about that? I mean, do they agree that a
Scott, I'm sorry.
space
I
could
think you
be...
talked to my husband. I apologize that I wasn't part of those conversations, but it's situated on the corner of North Willard and Loomis, and there's a gate that goes around the side, and you could technically, it would cost us a lot of money, but we could and would do it. We'd take down the gate, and you could drive in and park behind.
I just wanna-
But I'm not sure that your environmental
I think you don't have
team
the
would
lot
allow us to
coverage,
do
right?
that.
Yeah, that's what I
You
was
don't
saying.
have the lot coverage to do that.
Yeah, I know. We had the same problem, honestly, when we replaced the deck at 121, because in order to make the deck compliant, and this, I mean, we've been round and round. In
Yeah.
order to make the deck compliant from a rise and run of the stairwell, right, and not take up more green space with more footing to accommodate the new one, we had to dig up part of the driveway to have net zero impact.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
So here it would
it's challenging. We are
be the same
compliant.
problem here.
We are
Yeah.
crazy compliant. I mean, you have had no issues with us whatsoever. Everything we do is by the book.
I know this house pretty well. Years ago, my partner used to be a renter at the house. And my question is, when you acquired it, was it owner-occupied with 4 additional renters? Because that's how, as I understood, it was occupied for a very long period of time. Because I know there's 5 bedrooms there.
Yes, it came up when we were talking about the transaction with the owners. And I believe they had an informal arrangement for tenants.
Well, I know there's been tenants there for,
There, yeah,
Very
they
long
had
time.
non-family members living there.
yeah. And do you know how many were there when you bought it, when you looked at it?
I honestly don't.
And with the parking, would you consider a requirement that if we were to grant you the right to rent to a 5th unrelated person, that person could not have a vehicle?
Yes.
How would you enforce that?
Well, we're actually incredibly stringent landlords. Although we rent to students, we interview all the students, we interview all the parents, and the parents coincide the leases. We use the property manager to monitor the activity on the property as well. That's why we have someone who's very local. Other than requiring it and providing the car share service, that's why I thought of the 3rd deeded space. You know, could that be an option here? Other than forbidding it and then enforcing it, I'm not sure what more I could do. If you have suggestions, I'm totally open to it.
No, I was asking how you would enforce it. Would you put it in the lease or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can tell you as we're already interviewing tenants for next year, and we're already telling them it's 2 cars only.
So, if I may, just curious, how long is the driveway currently? Do you know?
20 feet.
I don't, Scott, you
Okay.
might know. I think I have
Rough
a
estimate?
blueprint.
It's long enough for at least one 20-foot space. I don't remember exactly.
There's a garage, and
Yeah.
then the space is behind it,
Yeah.
and then the sidewalk. And then the
Okay. And then, do you
Can't
use
get
the?
2 cars there.
Robbie?
Oh, thanks. Do you use the garage for parking?
We don't use it for anything, but it's available for parking. I mean, it's fully functional with an automatic garage door opener, and it's empty for a car, should the tenants choose to use it.
Okay, thank you.
So that would be the second space would be in the garage?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, just, perhaps you're aware, I mean, there's been a long history of how many unrelated adults live in apartments, and there's a reason for the ordinance having been developed, so it's not
Oh, I'm
sort of
sure.
a casual kind of thing, and that's why there's requirements, and that's why this was something that had to come before us and be discussed,
No,
and
I
the-
understand. I'm
and
sure
the-
it
and the
often
lot-
leads
And the
to.
parking is not, I mean, it is not an option with lot coverage. You're not going to get a waiver on
Add
that.
another parking space?
You're not going to
No.
get another parking space. You got 39% lot coverage and it's 40%.
It's already over, right?
Yeah,
It's already over.
it's already over, so there's nothing to be done with that. So that's not an option, just
Kind
to
of stuck.
mention that.
Yeah, if a family lived there, though, imagine a family lived there with 3 teenagers. What would happen then?
Yeah.
They might have 2 adults and just a 16-year-old would have perhaps have 3 cars.
Yeah.
But they
perhaps.
would meet
Or
the,
one
You-
person could have 4 cars.
Right. So, and
they
wouldn't
would
be
meet
subject
the
to
zoning
this
ordinance, though, for the number of required spaces for a residential property.
It's just a,
Would they?
Yes.
If,
Yeah, it's
oh,
just 2.
I thought it went with unrelated adults. My mistake. If, I've been trying to solve this any way I can think of, whether it's leasing another parking space in town, whether it's trying to find a way at one of our other properties to accommodate another car in a very formal way. There's a nice lot behind 104 that's a garden now, and I'd hate to think that, the right answer here is to
Can't turn
is to
residential-
pave that.
You can't turn residential
No, we don't want
area
to do
into
that.
parking,
Yeah.
I don't think.
It's definitely a
Separate
conundrum.
use, right?
Yes is the short answer.
Yeah.
So Brad, may I pipe in with a couple
Yes.
points? So the size standard in the zoning code expressly states not including the attic or the basement. It doesn't distinguish whether it's finished or not. So in other words, if the attic is finished, we still don't count it. Likewise, the basement. The other item I wanted to point out is that the zoning code doesn't actually define attic. So we have a handy-dandy architectural dictionary that we refer to on occasion like this. And I can get you the exact language if you wish, but to paraphrase, it basically says an attic is a space or room immediately below the roof line, particularly on a house.
we had this.
Which
we
is
had
what
this
this is.
Very long conversation.
On the
another
same
project.
street.
Yeah, on the same street.
I mean,
So it appears to me to be a finished attic, so we wouldn't count the space.
yeah, and I don't know what the source of that is, which is sort of interesting because the building code used to not allow third-floor attics, and I think that changed, so I think it's actually allowable now throughout the city, where before it wasn't without sprinklers and stuff
Right.
like that, so. But that's not within our purview.
That's I'm proud of the mix tonight. Yep.
So, question for staff. So given that, am I correct in understanding that since the definition of attic isn't defined, we're left to define it?
We are left to define it, but that doesn't mean that we can't rely on a reputable resource, such as an architectural dictionary.
There are a few people in the public who have something to say, then maybe if you could take a seat.
Sure.
We'll have them come up, and then you'll get a chance to come back. So Carolyn, or who wants to start?
Thank you. So I do know the history of.
Introduce
okay.
yourself.
Sorry, I'm Karen Long, and I already signed in. I live on Henry Street and have for 34 years, and I own 73 North Willard. It's a duplex with one single family, well, one bedroom apartment upstairs for one person and two bedroom downstairs for two people. So we have 3 tenants there, and we actually have a long driveway that goes back. Parking is not an issue. This place has been an issue ever since it changed hands. It had been, many years ago, it was a rental, and many of you might know this. There were up to 17 people living in it, and the landlord was not very respectable or, careful in our neighborhood. So luckily, a young, very ambitious couple bought the place and totally restored it. It is gorgeous inside, totally gorgeous. And when they got transferred, they sold it, and the people that lived in it last was an older couple, my age. They retired. They have a place in the islands. So the husband chose to be out there more, and the wife was still working because she was a bit younger. And while she worked in Burlington, she continued to live there, and she did rent out 2 or 3 of the rooms. And they were always like medical students. I met some of them. And each tenant had a room and an office. It wasn't like each person was in a room. They had their own space, and they shared the kitchen. So when the house turned over, immediately I saw a difference in the landscaping. I didn't notice the painting this summer, but I have been gone a lot. I do notice the trash. There is still today a barrel of trash that is overflowing in the front, along with a Gauthier's trash toter, which in Burlington, it's not very sightly to keep your trash in the front 24/7. There had been this twin mattress that the owner talked about, and it was there for weeks, not 3 days. And it went from the green belt to inside the fence to outside the fence to the green belt. I mean, it just got tossed around. So whoever is managing it was not quick to clean that up. The biggest problem for me is, yes, this might be a great investment. Maybe she could go back to renting to 17 people like the person, 15 years ago. But if we do that, and we're really trying to restore our neighborhoods, and we spent $68,000 on the neighborhood project, we are trying to save some single-family houses so that an owner-occupied family or person, and we raised our children in a house. We had 2 vehicles. We had 3 teenagers. They don't need their own cars in Burlington. So to think that a family can't buy the house because there's only 2 parking spaces, I think that's not correct. But with the cars, I have experienced cars blocking the driveway several times. The first time I spoke to girls on the porch, they were very snooty to me, like, no, but, it's always there. It doesn't matter. So I will admit that the next time there was a car and these cars are halfway over the sidewalk, I called the police. So that's probably why they got a parking ticket. But it's inconsiderate. We need to save our neighborhood. I really hope you will support the staff, support our neighborhood project. Try to... Every house, or many, many houses in Burlington have finished the attic. And yeah, I could do that with my house on Henry Street and put a couple kids up there. And, it's just if you live in town, which you all do, and if you lived in my neighborhood where we are on the edge, Weston Street has a couple houses with more than 4 unrelated. Last weekend, it was the weekend before, there was a party. The police, I just got the report today, more than 100 students were pulled out of that house, and I wondered why the police were there so long, and that was why. So my feeling is these student homes belong on campus. It's a de facto dorm, and just because it's a big home doesn't mean we need to cram every spot with a body. So please support the staff and code office and our neighborhood project. Thank you.
Any questions for Karen? Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Busher. I'm a city councilor for Ward 1. And although this is not in my ward, it's close. And I did want to speak because I feel pretty strongly about the ordinances that we have currently that are supposed to help us with quality of life in our neighborhoods. They were carefully crafted so that we would potentially not overuse a property. And with that overuse comes, as we all know, potential cars, potential additional trash, and more foot traffic, and the potential for some scenarios like Karen referenced parties. I'm not even stating that. Just normal use, when you have more people than a house oftentimes can hold or normally accommodate, it becomes burdensome to the rest of the neighborhood. I understand that the third floor is finished, and I understand why that would be misleading for the owner to think that it's not an attic. And I feel that we're all victims of the attorneys and the real estate people that we work with, and we find out things after the fact. I found out some very surprising things about a boundary line after many years that I bought my house. So I'm empathetic to that. I do want to say that I do support staff's recommendations. I think that the property that was cited here, where they went to the court and got approval, talked about a manager on site, not a manager in the community, but on site. I think that's pretty onerous, and I think that for most people, I think that would be difficult to accommodate. So I think that's an entirely different scenario than the one that that the applicant has put forward. If indeed the square footage, you know, as she stated and as you all know, that if you have a large property and you have additional square feet, you can exceed the 4 unrelated, but there are strict criteria regarding that. And some of that had to do, and I don't know whether this was thoughtful or not, but some of it had to do with the very abuse of a property by an investor going into the attic, going into the basement, making rooms sometimes where there shouldn't be rooms to accommodate more people. That is one of the things that we're trying to prevent. So I'm not saying that's this scenario. The other thing that I just wanted to touch upon is that if indeed there was a parking waiver, in Ward 1, they just removed parking on Colchester Avenue, and there are a number of investment properties there, and I've been trying to help the people, the tenants that live in them, because now they don't have on-street parking, and they don't have adequate off-street parking. So you really have to think about it. If there's on-street parking, you have to think about what you're doing to the rest of the people. Can people have visitors, et cetera? So you have to understand the pressures of the street. And so I think twice about parking waivers now with the way Burlington is in flux and changing rules to accommodate bike lanes and eliminate some what we thought was guaranteed on-street parking. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sharon.
Hi, my name is Sandy Wynn, and I lived at 73 North Willard. I lived 2 houses down when this property was packed with students. I moved there in 1998, and it was a nightmare. I won't begin to describe what we lived with. Today, between Loomis and Pearl, there are 4 owner-occupied properties on all of this street, on North Willard, on both sides. We have some more responsible landlords than we did, but it is a very, very precarious neighborhood. And it's like a cancer. Once it starts to grow, it can just grow and grow and grow. When we finally passed the 4 unrelated, it turned a lot of these nightmare properties around. It's sliding back, and I am very concerned about it sliding back. So I hope you will support the staff recommendations. I'm sure that this particular owner now is a good landlord, or hopefully will be a good landlord. As a real estate agent, I can tell you that when anyone buys a property in this city, especially investment, and especially when they're dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars in an investment, they ask questions. I would hope the real estate agents involved asked questions and educated. I hope the lawyers did, but certainly the investor. I can't imagine making that kind of investment and not talking to planning and zoning to know what you can do with your property. So I'm afraid I don't have a lot of sympathy on that particular point, but please support the staff recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bill Ward. I'm the director of the Permitting and Inspections Department. Formerly, it was known as Code Enforcement until July 1st. So I'm familiar with the property, having been really off of our radar screen when it was owner-occupied. And particularly this summer, it came to our attention. There were reports in August about the cars from Karen Long that were being emailed to myself and to Scott Gustin about cars blocking the driveway. They were routed to John King. John King is the parking official from the city of Burlington who can direct his staff. So there were two separate reports that I was aware of. Specifically one I wanted to just follow up on that I think you heard Karen Long and the property owner talk about. I had an email that had a photo of a mattress that was in front of the property. So the mattress was hanging between the driveway and the neighboring property to the south of 83 North Willard. And I had seen the condition prior, but this is the time of year where, again, as a new property being rented out and under these circumstances, I wanted to test it a little bit. I will be honest to say I did not jump on it the moment I saw it, because things go out in front of a number of properties, but I thought it would be a good way to find out if someone was paying attention other than myself or my staff. But I had received follow-ups from the neighbors over those next few days that nothing was happening about it. And on the 28th of August, I called the property owner that's listed in our database, Rachel, and I believe she's the owner of the property's daughter. So the phone call I had, I first left a message for Rachel and got a call back. Essentially, what I was saying was the mattress out front has to go. It's been there for close to a week. It had been several days. And I said, it's the type of thing that really someone should have been paying attention to, and the tenants should have let you know about long ago. She said she would check on that right away and get back to me. And the response I got, I was really dissatisfied with. She said, it's not the tenants. It doesn't belong to them. In my line of thinking, if something sits in front of your properties, and respectfully, if it was one of your properties, I might tell you the same thing. If something sat in front of your property for a week and no one did anything about it, I would have expected, what I would do is if something was dumped in my driveway, I would be on the phone to any official who would hear, talk to me, or do anything about it. That didn't happen in this case, and so a week later, I let Rachel know I was really dissatisfied. That needed to be resolved. Her response was that she's not the property manager anymore, but they were going to take care of the trash, but the mattress wasn't theirs. I did get a message, a voicemail message from Andy, I believe her dad, the property owner, saying that they were going to take care of the mattress, and it did go away. But I looked at that as sort of a bad indicator that somebody, whoever was supposed to be taking care of the property, was not looking after it. And if the property owners weren't there and the property manager wasn't doing their job, again, I saw it as a bad example of property maintenance and property management. And I concur with Karen Long that there has been trash stored in front of the property. It's not part of the housing code. It's actually not okay to store trash, whether it's on the curb or even in the front yard under the housing ordinance. I know that's not zoning, but for the Chapter 18, Section 111, trash isn't allowed to be stored in the front yard or by the curb of a property. It's supposed to be on the side or in the back and not in plain view in the front yard on any day other than for the day of collection. So that's it, unless anyone has any questions.
So I just wanted to follow up real quickly. The applicant said that she did call your office a few times. Did that happen?
So the only call I got was a message back from Andy, and it was after my initial call. I'm not sure, it's possible, I'd be speculating, but it's possible they called another department, possibly the Department of Public Works, but I don't know if that was the office that got that call or not.
Thanks, Bill. Okay. Does the applicant, do you want to come back up? So you can see it's quite a hill to climb that was not of your making necessarily, but you're showing up in the middle of it with a lot of history.
I can feel that. And I think if I were an owner and an occupant in Burlington, I would have similar concerns about how the neighborhood is turned over and the interest in having owner-occupied properties. I can't really speak to that here. I'm honestly an investor. I'm honestly a great landlord, I'd like to think, and very responsive. I'm a little confused by the conversation here, and certainly the comments about essentially testing us as landlords. When Rachel moved out in May, we immediately filed the appropriate paperwork to change the property manager to Emily LaFleur, a local, all right? I find it interesting that we were being tested as landlords when honestly that we aspire to be great landlords, fabulous landlords, and really respect the property and the neighborhood. I really wish that you had reached out to us. I really do, because we would be horrified that we were in any way upsetting the neighbors, honestly. There are now 2 properties for sale on North Willard Street, 69 and 72, and they're both absolutely embarrassments. And I think the town should think about how that's going to end when you make it continually hard for people who are law-abiding, rule-following, permit filing. And I think in the 3 years here, I'll bet you we filed 20 permits and paid goodness knows how much in fees to try and do everything just right, just like I'm here today. I think as a town, we need to confront, and I say we, who's going to buy 69 and 72 North Willard and turn them into the kind of attractive, safe, appropriate, permitted housing that you would like them turned into. I can do that.
Yeah, the only thing is that we're following the ordinance here, and I understand your sentiments about it, but I think the ordinance was developed because if those properties that you're describing are developed to the maximum that one could do, it created a series of problems that had a domino effect throughout the whole city.
I totally
And
understand
that's
that,
what-
but I'm not part of that problem.
Well,
And I'm bearing the burden
You
for
are
past bad landlords and
You-
past
you-
non-rule followers,
And the city's bearing the benefit of the ordinance.
I'm sure.
So it's,
Is there any, so I guess what I want to ask is, are there any circumstances under which you'd approve this? So I feel sometimes as though I'm saying, well, how about if I did this? How about if I did that? Are there any circumstances under which this would be allowed,
We'd have to talk about it.
even in a provisional?
well, we'll
Nature?
take this up, we'll deliberate on this.
Okay.
The ordinance, there's a couple of things about the ordinance that are problems. You mentioned the square footage, but the square footage is of 2 floors, not the 3 floors, so that technically you don't actually meet the square footage of the ordinance. The parking is an issue, so I don't know what the result of that is and what we would do in deliberation, whether there's any.
Okay.
That's the answer.
I understand the dilemma and the sincerity of your approaching this.
I
And,
respect your time.
okay.
Thank you for allowing me to be heard.
Bill, did you have something you wanted to add?
I'd rather not.
And if there's an issue that you want to heal with the history, you might want to just talk to.
No, I actually just wanted to clear the record and make sure that it's clear for the board and for the property owner to understand. This property wasn't singled out. I am dealing with 10,000 rental units on a daily basis in the city of Burlington, and there are a couple thousand of them that turn over for the students. And so with that neighborhood, there were probably, I would say, between 30 and 50 properties where I had similar observations, but again, don't have enough time in the day to call everybody and document everything, but I was aware of a number of different issues to try to see, is the property being taken care of itself, or does it require us to directly act to determine if the people are taking good care of the property? So I want to be clear on that. This was not the only property where I drove by something and didn't take action immediately because I saw something out front, because there were dozens and dozens of them across the city in general, because that's what happens with the big move out. But we have to have a plan in place and expect that property owners will handle most of them, and the few the property owners that don't act demand us to do that. But we don't have enough time in the day to call everyone during that move-in period.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for participating. And with that, we'll close the public hearing. We have one other item on our agenda, 37 Village Green. I'm assuming the applicant is not here.
I don't see her. She was informed of the meeting last week, responded to that she would be here, but I haven't, she's not
It's
here.
on our,
It was
marked-
recommended as consent.
Well, so maybe we can move it to consent on the next agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do we need a motion to move it to the next agenda for consent?
Yes.
Yes.
So moved.
Any discussion about moving this to the next? All in favor? Opposed? Okay. And then 2026 Church Street is withdrawn, so we don't need to take any action on that. Is that correct?
Correct.
I have one question for you, Scott. It sort of came out of this Willard Street thing, and that is that we have a lot of applications where we've had parking management plans, and we have car share and other things that have. We had a report on some of that.
We had a parking report.
But do we have a report on how the car share has worked out in terms of parking management?
We have a standard requirement for folks receiving parking waivers to report back to us every year for 3 years as to actual parking demand. I've sick Ryan on that a time or two. I produced numbers for this board probably 2 years ago at this point, and it's on the to-do list to have a follow-up.
Update. Okay. Thank you. Anything else on our agenda?
I would just note that we have our new zoning clerk, Ellie Davis, here tonight.
Welcome.
Welcome.
And with that, we're adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you.
When will you deliver